Good evening, welcome to the stream tonight, the studio. We're carrying on with pyrography, doing some more of this elephant. See if I can get this light in a place where I don't get as much glare. Okay. Not got as much of a consistent colour around there as I'd like to have, so I'll do some work on that. Okay, just plugging the pyro machine in. So, just going to do some work on the colouring around here. It's not fantastically consistent, so I shall be doing a bit of work there just to make it a little bit more consistent and potentially darker. Yeah, that's working. Right. Yeah, I need a reasonably consistent colour across there. It's not as good a colour as I'd like. I'm feeling rather impatient tonight, so I'm going to have to be careful in doing this. So this area really is the, I was going to say the dragon. I've been carving too long. This elephant's here. Bit of a difference between an elephant and a dragon. Although I guess since nobody's ever really seen a dragon in real life, one actually wouldn't know what the differences were. That's better. We're getting a bit darker now around here. Hopefully making the colour a little bit more consistent. I'm not after a fantastically solid colour because of course the elephant has quite a rough skin texture. So if I've got sort of spots, blotches, etc., it's not all that significant to the workpiece, in this, especially in this really dark area. that, yeah. So just going back over what I did last night, just to increase the darkness. Some areas of this wood are reacting quicker to the heat than others. Which then becomes all part of the skill to deal with that. I will, although there isn't a lot here, I will put more skin texture in later on. So, anybody who hasn't seen pyrography before, that's what you're looking at. Quite sort of an almost literal translation is writing with fire. Well, excuse me, whilst that's a literal translation, it's not the practical translation. The practical translation is drawing with heat. And that's what we're doing here. This is an electrically heated tool, and what it's doing is it's causing the sap or the resin in the wood to come out of the fibres and get cooked, and then it sits on top of the wood like a glaze or a varnish. And the more heat that's applied, the darker the colour becomes. There are various shapes and sizes of tools available to do different things. This one is quite suited to doing this sort of work. This is called a flat shader. Flat because it's flat. You can possibly see the edge there fairly obviously. It's quite a flat object. And a shader because it's used to create shades rather than writing, for example. So looking at this is a writing tip or a lining tip. So that's more like a pen nib. This is more like a sort of pencil side where you'd create shades. So that's what I'm doing here, is I'm creating a dark shade. Going over an area I've already gone over. That's one thing you can do with pyrography. You can darken things. It's not as easy to make things lighter, but you can go over things that you've already done to darken them down. And this area, which is part of the elephant's ear, is in quite a strong shadow compared with the rest of the elephant, and is almost black in reference images, but I don't necessarily need to make it black. It's all about contrast range and what this looks like in contrast to something that's next to it. So the darker something is that's next to it, the lighter this looks, if that doesn't sound daft. But you look at colours and shades in reference to each other so you can see that, you know, this is quite light, that's quite dark. So once this is done, you will see that as a shadow, you'll see that as a light area, and so on. That's if we do it right, of course. If we don't do it right, it won't look like that at all. So we're working quite slowly. The heat is turned down quite a bit on this tool. I've not worked with this particular plywood before, so I don't actually know its characteristics. It is just actually, what is this wood? I've forgotten what this wood is, and that doesn't help me. Birch plywood. Let's say it's birch. It's I think it's an AB grade plywood, but it's a white plywood. This wood generally is used for laser cutting, which means it will actually take heat quite well. But the different sheets of wood have different sort of characteristics in the way in which they will react when heat is applied. Some will turn brown quicker than others. Some areas of the wood will turn brown quicker than others. And sometimes areas that go brown look kind of muddy. This looks a bit muddy. Other times they look a lot more shiny and will actually sort of shrink away a lot more. This is shrinking quite a bit. And sometimes you end up having to turn the heat up because it just decides it's not going to take any more. So you just don't get an increased colour sometimes, so you end up having to heat the tool up further to sort of get, it's almost as though a level of colour insulates the wood underneath, doesn't let any more of the liquid come to the surface, or even it sort of goes hard enough so that it doesn't actually cook any further, and so you end up having to increase the heat to sort of penetrate further into the cooked resin which is now on the surface. But it is quite slow anyway. It takes time to build up colour, and I don't really want to carbonise this, so I want to do it slowly so that I've got control. Now, if you've ever seen pyrography done on YouTube or something like that, you've probably been watching it in time lapse, so you might be surprised it's not as fast as it looks. I mean, I can actually turn the heat up on this tool so it almost glows orange, but then you've got to be extremely skilled to be able to control that heat and draw fast enough to create just the shades that you want. And that takes quite a lot of time to develop that level of skill. Now this area is supposed to be almost black. I almost certainly am not going to take it that dark. There is, at this stage at least, no need to do so. Although I do have to be careful, as I just overheated the wood there a little bit. there's a fine line sometimes between heating it just enough and heating it a little bit too much. Okay, we've got some dark areas around the trunk in the centre here, so we'll do a little bit of colouring in those areas. This is kind of very much like drawing, really. Very similar sorts of techniques in terms of shading and things like that. And if you see me blow on the end here, as you might just have heard then, I'm doing is just literally I'm cooling it down. If I don't have the tool on the wood, it will heat up quite a bit, and then if I put it down on the wood, I'll just create instantly create quite a dark spot, which may not be what I'm after. So what I'll do is blow on the tip, which will cool it down, and then it won't have got too hot by the time it touches down on the wood, and I'll have more control over the colour that I'm creating, rather than have it suddenly go dark brown. Now what I'll do is put texture on afterwards, if I feel appropriate, and it may not. I may just decide that I actually like the sort of smooth look and leave it at that. Or we may do what cartoonists would perhaps do, which is just to add small areas of texture, implying that the rest is like that as well. And we've got some around here, which is where the trunk just tucks under. So this will be a case almost of dotting around, doing some areas and then redoing others. So it's very much like I'm drawing with a really light pencil. That goes quite a way up towards the eye socket. And then just the shade is causing us to have quite a sharp straight down. Look here. Actually that's going more over that way to, that's the base there, so we're going to about here, and we're doing that. I'm looking at reference pictures. I've got 2 or 3 over here to my side. Looking for where the shadows might be, so you sort of see the structure of the elephants head, and knowing roughly where the light's coming from, which is over this side. That's why this ear, for example, is shaded by the trunk, which is being held up. So as I say, just a light colouring. Light colouring I can make darker, darker colouring I can't easily do much about. You can always add, not very easy to take away. What I'm going to do is give myself a crease there, which is kind of a bit of the neck of the elephant. I'm wondering whether to switch to a different shader to do some of this, but I'm not sure. I think I'll stick with this one for the moment. I do have a bigger shader, but it's a bit more of an awkward shape to get in to these areas with. But I'll show you what it looks like. So it's this one compared with this one. It's not so bad to use, it's just a bit wider, and this one I've got a little bit more control over. It's very much like using a fat pencil with a thinner pencil. So this is basically the elephant's mouth around here, and again this will be quite dark. By the way, don't try not to get small hairs or big hairs on the tip of this. Apart from anything, it creates like a carbonised area, which you don't always want. It smells terrible. If you've ever burnt hair, you'll know it's not a very pleasant smell. Heated wood can be, but hair, no. So all very sort of soft, fluffy colouring here. Got trying to use a tendency to move the tool in the direction that the shade or the shape is moving. So if I'm doing a circle, I'd be doing curves like this. You kind of get that texture into the material as you're doing it, so it sometimes helps just because of the way you get like movement lines from the tool. You don't always get a perfect markings, so it does help to move in the direction that you're actually wanting the surface to move, if that sort of makes sense, I hope. Actually, I guess you're not really seeing too much of the shading that I'm applying in these sorts of areas, just because it's quite pale is the shading that I'm doing, and you can sort of see that in that sort of direction there. So I'm wondering if I can prop this up with anything, because it would actually help me to do that, because I'm getting glare off of the light. See if I can hold it this sort of direction. Okay, so that's going to come there alongside that tusk, yeah. Agnes, good evening. Welcome to the studio this evening. And hello to you. How are you doing? So effectively we've got a sort of a bit of the mouth. And just folds of the skin around here. It's quite a bit difficult to see, but tusk is around there. We got a dark outline around it, which is what I expected. So let's see if I can put a dark outline in. I can do it relatively easy with this. See if I can do it without having to heat the tool up too much. No, I can do it. So just as the skin sort of folds over the top, you get quite a slightly, quite a dark area, I guess, which is just sort of outlines the base of the tusk. Okay, that goes quite a way through to about here. So quite a versatile tool is this. I can use it for large areas, or I can even just tilt it slightly as I'm doing there and almost draw with it. Well, I can draw with it. That's essentially what I'm doing here. Okay. I'm not doing too bad, thank you very much, Kenneth. And now, by about the beginning of this week, I'd managed to get rid of a cold that I got for over the past, all the last remnants of a cold that I got whilst I was away on holiday, and back to normal. Although for some reason my voice seems really quiet tonight. So much of what I'm doing here really to start with is sort of establishing some areas of light and dark. And just working out placement of things. And then afterwards I can go back in, tighten up the areas and add more detail, add more colour. Whilst I sort of had a bit of assistance in creating the outline, the rest of this is going to be done almost completely freehand. Now that's quite a sharp edge, and it's quite dark as well, just around this area. Just this little bit of shadow just underneath the tusk and alongside the trunk. So and of course the edge of the tusk is nice and clean. There's no texture on the tusk. So I want a really, quite a relatively speaking, sharp line. Actually, I can probably continue that all the way through to there. And this area under here is as dark as this area up here, if not slightly darker. And that's what I'll be doing all the way through. This is about as dark as this place over here, and I'll then try and make the colours the same. So for quite a while, you know, when you're looking at it on the camera like this, you may not see the overall shape or the overall image, but gradually, hopefully, as I progress further and fill more of it in, it will actually start to look more like an elephant. Now this bottom edge, there's that edge there and this edge here, quite clean, as I say, sharp edges. But this bottom edge here is the edge of the skin, and the elephant skin isn't smooth, of course, so I'm just going to I'm not going to be particularly pedantic about getting a straight, clean edge. I'm just going to more or less have a rough working edge, which we may tidy up later, or we may not, but it's sort of a soft edge. Okay, I will try and speak a bit louder and clearer because I'm a little bit tired. My voice, when I get tired, I tend to speak a little bit faster. I also tend to drop my voice. But your written English is... I wouldn't know the difference. At this stage of working on the piece, it's not about details, it's about areas of shade or colour. This is although it's brown, it's black and white, it's monochrome, and it's about establishing all the shapes so you can see them and they have a colour which looks natural. And then we add details in afterwards, like the lines and the creases in the elephant's skin, and we make it dirty in some places, cleaner in others, that sort of thing. But I've never actually made an elephant before in pyrography, so I'm also learning this as I go along. Unfortunately, the lighting isn't great. Underneath the trunk around here is quite a bit of shadow, so that's one area I'm going to add some colour to at the moment. It will need to be darker than the colour I put down to start with, but I'm building this as kind of layers of colour. About here I think will do. Ultramove, good evening. There's nothing wrong with doing that, Ultramove. That is a pyrographic technique done both ways, and that is applying, generally speaking, watercolour pencils over the top of pyrography already applied. And also it can be done the other way. You can apply a coloured pencil and then apply pyrography over the top. that sort of technique does tend to seal the colour in, because this then forms like a varnish over the top, and you've got shading of colour. So it is a technique. I've not tried it yet. May try it one of these days. I don't think I'm going to do it on this particular piece, but it is a valid one. It's one I do want to try. It looks interesting to try. And of course you can sort of do both. You can apply colour, put pyrography over the top, and apply colour over the top of that as well. It's not an all or nothing. Indeed, I mean, there's no reason why you can't work in complete mixed media. You know, you could do this, carve some of it, or engrave it, I guess, on this thinner wood, and use an airbrush as well. And well, I would hope it will be awesome, Akenis. I won't know until I actually finish, but I'm going to do my best to make it like that. And we've got the inside of this trunk here is going to also be dark, specifically around here as well. Ultramove, do you do pyrography? It sounds like you've maybe tried it, or have you just seen people do that perhaps on YouTube? Now this is going to be somewhat rounded out because of the shape. I'm working on quite low heat settings. I don't want this to be done too rapidly in terms of the colouring. I don't want to suddenly jump to a very dark colour. I prefer to build up the colour in layers, at least until I have more experience of doing it. Been a little while as well since I last did a pyrographic piece, several weeks, so need to get back into the techniques. Thank you, Akenis. And it's going to come from about this sort of area here out, and around here. Kind of one of the nice things for me is you probably can't see that line I've just created, partly because of the glare. But before the wood takes much of a colour, it's a bit like you've taken a paintbrush in water and painted it on wood. You get sort of like a watermark. Well, I've kind of got that now using a low heat tool like this and using it quite quickly. I can almost draw guidelines which will then easily, I won't say erase, but disappear into the background once once you start colouring the rest of it in, it sometimes makes life easier in that because if I use a pencil, then and I apply pyrography over the top of the pencil, because pyrography is a bit like applying varnish over the top. It vanishes over the top of the pencil and the pencil mark stays visible, which is not great. So you either have to work completely freehand or erase pencil marks before you get there, or use this sort of half technique of drawing fairly fast with low heat, so you get what is sort of like a watermark. Now, as I said earlier on in the stream, whilst I am endeavouring to try to be fairly smooth in these in the colour, so we get consistent colour, the skin texture of the elephant means that there will be lines and patches all over it. So it's not as important as if I was doing, for example, if I was trying to do a car, you'd want really, really smooth, consistent colour, because the way in which the car reflects the light, and it's a smooth surface. Little sort of texture and differences in the shading would look wrong on a car. On the elephant, because of the skin texture, it matters less. If I go really silly and create really dark and light splotches, it won't look good, but minor variations, as I'm getting here, are not particularly important, which makes it easier to do. I'll have to remember to keep holding it up for you so I can get it out the glare. That might work a little bit better, make it a bit easier. It's a bit of a dark picture, I'm afraid, but that might make it a bit easier to see. Let me just check that this camera is happy with that. I suspect it would like to. Okay, it's adjusting its own brightness. That's not too bad. So if I put the light over there, that should hopefully make it a bit easier for you to see what's going on without the background glare. Actually, it makes it a bit easy for me to see as well. So, like most things, there's pros and cons to doing things in different ways. I'm using low heat here. Makes it easier to control just how dark something becomes. Although it also means I've got to do multiple layers rather than just one. And also it can actually make it a little bit difficult sometimes to come back and do the second and third layer, because the colour that's already down tends to protect the wood from changing colour anymore. So that's kind of one of the cons to using very light temperature or low temperature like I'm doing here. So you have to sort of pick what's best in the circumstance, or to match your skill level. It is one thing that beginners often get with pyrography is they get a bit impatient with it, and turn up the heat on the tools quite a bit, and then they'll burn a piece, literally burn it. It'll carbonize, go black, and then that's not. If they're trying to do a sort of a photo-like image, then carbonizing it isn't very good. So if you're not a particularly patient person, you do have to learn patience doing this. I actually find I don't need a lot of patience, because I'm seeing this wood change colour. Perhaps not as fast as you might be expecting it, but it is relatively it is changing colour relatively easily as I do this, and therefore I see continuous change, which is means that when I don't need patience, because patience implies that something's not happening and you're having to wait. Well, I'm seeing something happening as I go, so. I've got another layer of colour, which is lighter, to roughly half the width of the trunk. So I'm just trying to establish where the colours sort of change, or the shades change. And I can see roughly around there. Some of this is shade, and some of this is just the different colour texture of the elephant itself. And it's useful to move the tool in the texture direction. That way any sort of rough edges sort of are in keeping, and you actually sort of see, like I'm creating curves here. You sort of see that in the elephant's skin as well, and it helps with the realism. Now one of the things I'm doing here is, this is a lighter colour, but I'm going to do is go all the way, instead of just filling this in, I'm coming all the way from the outside in, because that way this darkens as well, and I sort of maintain the contrast between the two, or the difference in light level between the two. Is the machine expensive, by the way? It's a difficult question to answer because of the different things that people consider to be expensive. This particular machine is called a razor tip, and it's a 2-pen machine. I'm trying to think what it was. So in terms of pyrographic systems, it is relatively expensive, yes. It's one of the more expensive systems. For example, there's a single pen razor tip system which is a little bit cheaper. It's not half the price, because there's not half the material, if you like. The only real difference between a single pen machine and a 2-pen machine is a switch and an extra socket. But this one, compared to some others, has a variable temperature gauge, for example. Others don't necessarily have that. So this machine has more facilities than some machines, and it's got removable pens, which actually make it more expensive. Others have fixed wired pens. Some don't even have sockets. You have to use a screwdriver, for example. So the additional facilities make this expensive. I can't actually remember what this one cost. If you want to look it up, it's called a razor tip SSD10. It's made in Canada, but in my case there are UK distributors, and there are distributors on the continent as well. There are pyrographic systems that look like a soldering iron, and indeed that is effectively what they are. They just have a different tip on it. Those are relatively cheap. You can do really good photorealistic art with those type of machines. You just have to be a little bit more skilled to do it. They are more suited to cartoon style or to stamping. These type of tools that I'm using here are more suited to I say photorealistic, but more photographic style of pyrography. But there again, there is at least one artist that you can find on YouTube that uses a blowtorch and creates photorealistic images using a blowtorch, but on a lot bigger piece of wood. And he really does burn wood. He sets fire to it sometimes. I'll show you this machine, and the easiest way actually is I'll just bring it into shot rather than move the camera. And now I'm going to put a light over here so you can see the machine. Now you're getting reflection off this. It's not a great. I'm not doing really well. Let me put a room light on, which actually might help in here. Helps a little bit. So what we've got here, bit of light, little bit of light. This is shiny metal, I'm afraid, so it's reflecting the light, and therefore it makes it hard, to see what's on there. But there you go. That's obviously the name of it, razor tip SSD10. Quite why it has a tiger on it. Well, I think it's a tiger, I'm not sure, but power switch here, which we turn the thing on and off. Now I didn't you're seeing those LEDs flicker, okay? I'm not. They're flickering for two reasons. One is the overhead light that I've got here is flickering 50 times a second, and there's an interference pattern with the LEDs. The other one is the camera shutter. The image is being scanned. It's seeing the what am I trying to say? It is also seeing the flickering of the LED, which is too fast for me to see. So that flickering isn't there in real life. It's too fast. This is what I use to control the heat of the tool. I've got two pens plugged in, and this switch here just tells me which switch I am using, and the LED is also telling me which one's live at the time. So this one's hot, this one's cold. No, it's okay. One of the things I like doing at Kenneth, and it's one of the reasons why I broadcast, is to show people this sort of art, to answer people's questions, and just generally interest people in doing it. Some people may well be interested in trying this for themselves and don't know anything about how to start or anything like that. I enjoy helping people. When I wanted to do things like pyrography for myself, and you look at websites that tell you what the machine is, doesn't tell you necessarily what they're best for. Or you look at YouTube videos, and YouTube videos, there'll be somebody on there saying you've got to have one of these to do this, and my first question always is why? Because if you want, if let's say somebody says if you want to do pictures on plywood, you've got to have one of these tools. Well, what happens if I've got a box? Do I need the same tool? Do I have to use a different tool? Is there something different about it? And I got and do with any of the art forms I do, I have got in the past very frustrated with either websites or YouTube videos where that's literally what's happened, and then when I want to do it on something different, like a box for example, I don't know, do I use the same tool? So what I like to do here is not tell you have to do something like it has to be this tool, but tell you why I choose to use this tool on this, and why I choose the wood, so that you, as somebody who's watching who might be interested, can apply that knowledge. And if you want to, I don't know, if you wanted for example to do some pyrography on, I don't know, a case for example, a glasses case, I've no idea whether this would work, but you can, you might be able to apply what I've said because I've explained why I'm doing something. Now if it was a wooden case, that might be more appropriate, and if it's so for example, this tool is a lot better than the soldering iron style if the wood's thin, because thin wood heats up a lot quicker, and the soldering iron style is a lot hotter. They contain a lot more heat, and it's easier to go right through the wood. It's a lot harder with this. So if I've got, say, a glasses case that's made out of wood, and I look at it and I go, it's thin wood. Okay, it's very thin wood, so what I want is something that doesn't hold a lot of heat. So this tool is perhaps better than the soldering iron one. So you've been able to apply the knowledge without having to be told exactly what to do, if you see what I mean. And that's what that's why I don't mind answering questions, and it's why I quite often ramble on a little bit about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, so that you can answer your own questions in some ways. And I'm blowing on the tip there because it heats up when it's just like this, and if I put it down I'll create without cooling it down, I'll create a blob. So there's two ways to get around that blob. One is to blow on the end, so when I put it down I don't create the blob because the tip's cool and it has to heat up. or the other one is to make sure that I don't put it down and leave it. So I have to put it down in a continuous movement. So I will, like a plane landing, I'll come in, land it, keep it moving and lift it off again. And that way the heat is dissipated fairly quickly, and again I don't get a blob. So also I mentioned in colouring this area here, I'm starting from back here and doing the whole area, not just this bit. And I mentioned that maintains the colour difference between this and this, but the other thing it does is it creates a smooth transition between the darker and the lighter area. If I try and come in here and just colour this area in, I'll actually almost certainly get a darkish sort of line around there that I don't want. Somewhat like the transition between this and this. And that's because you can't actually easily be that precise to just get in exactly along the edge of that line. And the other thing is, if you're trying to do it, you're putting the tool down and then moving it, and that's precisely what I've just said creates a blob. Now if I start at this end here and land it and move it, the landing doesn't create a blob, and I maintain the difference in colour, but I create a smooth transition between the two because I'm not trying to get exactly to the edge. So it's that's the other reason for me starting all the way back here when I'm colouring this area in here in a light colour. I'm also not particularly stopping at the same spot, I'm just roughly in the same area. That way also I don't create a line on this side. It's somewhat diffuse. It looks more natural that way. Thank you very much. I'm glad you found my stream as well. Of course, at this point, one of the things I could say is to help you find the stream again. You might like to follow me, as might anybody else who's watching the stream at the moment. But that's by no means necessary. I do tend to stream on a regular basis from about 1900 hours GMT, 2000 hours in the UK each night. And I almost exclusively broadcast in creative. Don't always. I do some artwork. Let's say one of the pieces recently was of a model, of a railway engine, and so I might, if I was doing another one of those, for example, broadcast in the train simulator section, because those people are interested in the model trains. So I say the train images. So, but most of the time I am in creative. Actually, I'll move that back again so we can all see what's going on. So this area around here now is starts to represent more like a shadow than sort of a particular skin colour or something like that. It's not an object itself, it's just shadow around the back of the trunk. I do often as well just hop around the images, working on a particular piece just catches my eye and I decide I'd like to do a different bit for a little while. And as I said earlier on in the stream, because this is an elephant and it's got quite highly textured skin, if I end up with a line that's slightly darker than another line, it's not particularly important because the skin is highly textured. It will just look like a more natural texture than something super smooth. In fact, in some ways I'm kind of not trying to create a super smooth area. I'm not trying very hard not to, but I'm also not trying very hard to create a super smooth area. Depending on the style of pyrography that you're doing, you build textures on top of textures on top of textures, and very much like any other form of image art, I guess. You certainly do it with airbrushing, which is something else that I do but not on stream. You'll put one layer of colour down with a texture, you'll put another layer of colour on with maybe a slightly different texture to build a kind of depth into the image. And pyrography, you can do the same thing. You can go ahead and just more or less do it all in one go. I prefer working in a way in which I build texture on top of texture. It seems to work better for my style of art. So I'm getting sort of lots, it's not showing up greatly to you a little bit, but you might be able to see sort of slight variations in this area here. I possibly could zoom in and show you a little bit about it. I'm not sure whether this is going to show up or not, we shall see. It's not great, but you can see sort of almost banding in these areas here. Not particularly intentional, it's not particularly not intentional either, it's just how it's happened. But that kind of suits the elephant skin. I'll zoom back out a bit, but I'll leave you with a more closer view for a while. Is this in focus? Yeah, I think it is. Let's see if the camera likes to choose its own focus for a bit. There we go. Now we will come back. This colour is by no means dark enough. Actually, I'm saying by no means dark enough. It may well turn out to be dark enough. It really depends on what I do with the background colour. So white, for example, is uncoloured wood. But to show white on a background, you actually have to make the background darker so the white stands out. So if I were to assume that and it doesn't look too bad, this wood colour is going to be the lightest colour on the elephant, then some of those light areas would be along this front edge of the trunk where the sun is shining on it. It wouldn't be white. An elephant isn't white, it's grey brown, but the lightest areas might be left as the natural wood colour along here, for example. But for you to be able to see them, what I have to do is create the edge away from it, the background, to be darker. So that's, see if I can show you what I mean by that. Okay, yeah, got a bit here on this one. As you can see here around the cat's muzzle, I highly suspect you're seeing this muzzle area here as being white. It's actually the natural colour of the wood, and that natural colour is actually slightly darker than this one. But you're seeing it as white because there's a dark edge here for the background, which is then fades out a little bit. And so that's how you represent very light colours, or indeed how you represent white. But you can only do it because the background is darker. I couldn't have had a white background. You wouldn't have seen the edge of the cat's face. And again, down this side here, you wouldn't see the shape. This fur is all white on this particular cat. You wouldn't see this area here without this shadow that's underneath. And a little bit around here, just to guide your eye around the shape of the face. It needs that little bit of darkness. You can't actually work with pure white most of the time, or completely uncoloured wood. I actually like that one. That's one of my better pyrographic pieces. I'm hoping this is going to be as well. I want to do a little bit around the eye. The elephant has almost an arched, I won't say an eyebrow, but it's got an arched area just above its eye. Sort of where the eye socket is. And that's sort of slightly darker than the rest of the skin around that area, which then sort of leads, I guess it's where some of the muscles of the nose come down into the trunk. So it comes down to roughly in this sort of area here. No, it's a bit more. So I'm starting to establish shapes, not necessarily colours or anything like that, but shapes, which help tell your eye what it is you're seeing. And this is sort of comes across here. So that comes backwards a little bit. And sort of around. down and around, down, around, round about there. Now I don't know whether this is just skin coloration or shadow effects. It's certainly the shape of the skull. So I can make this dark. The eye is, whilst the eye is open, it's relatively small. It's very much like the I keep wanting to say dragon because I've been carving a dragon for the past several weeks. So if I say dragon, I actually mean elephant. But it's almost as it's got its eyes almost closed. So that hence the very dark area there. I've sort of got a dark shadow just here in the corner of the eye as well. So I'll just darken that down a little bit. I will have some texture to put in here afterwards. There's sort of a muscle like we've got here, a little sort of pouch underneath the eye, which I can see, which is sort of a dark area, a shadow area around here. And then this whole area around here is a little bit darker than the rest of the skin, and it lightens off a little bit towards here. Again, there's not a lot of difference, so we'll just apply a light colouring now, and we'll darken it as we darken the rest of the elephant. But it's enough to stand out a little bit. I generally, pyrography almost literally translates as writing with fire, and I normally sort of, a more practical translation is drawing with heat, but in actual fact it's more like painting with heat. Because of the sort of the different shading and things that you do. Drawing tends to imply sort of straight lines like a cartoon perhaps, whereas painting implies more variations and colour, and I think I might actually start using sort of painting with heat as a better translation of what pyrography is. I should see now start to see a darkened area around there, and actually that eye starts to look more natural and eye-like. Yeah. Well, that kitty's called Junior, and from time to time he does visit the stream. He was actually a wild cat who has become tame, which is quite amazing in its own right, and he's called Junior. It was called Junior to distinguish him from a similar black and white cat that was called Senior because it was an old cat. But there's another one here. If you like the cute kitties. This is a different cat. Hopefully you can see it's a different cat to that one with a different face shape. Although I was about to say they're both black and white cats. They're actually not black and white. Junior is a black and white cat. This one here is called Felix, and Felix is a very dark brown. He looks black until you actually get close, or you put the two cats side by side. But again, you can see the whiteness around here, which isn't actually white on this in real life. So another cute kitty. Now we're doing a cute elephant. Actually, as we started to put some colour into this now, you should now actually be able to see more of the I keep wanting to say dragon, the elephant's facial structure and the actual face, and it should start to look a bit more natural. I'm looking at this on my broadcast window in OBS, which is what I use for broadcasting, and I've found with streaming that I often do this because, and you'll see me looking up because the monitor's over there. I often do this because the view from the camera is a bit like me stepping back and looking at this maybe from 3 or 4 feet away, which gives me a better overall view. So when I'm looking at this directly, looking down at it, and if I look up at the monitor actually looks better because it's got I'm too close to it here really, and that is also sometimes one of the tricks, is to step back and look at something.